Number 1. The Walk. I grew up on the West Coast for the first part of my life. This would have been up until I was around 15 years old. Around that time, my life changed a whole lot. We went from the bustling coastal cities to, I guess what some people would call, the heartland of America. We went out to the country. My father had worked for a long time, and he had been able to retire early. So he wanted to move out to the country so that he could try to establish a peaceful writing career. I should get this right out, that I was in no way bitter about the move. That's a theme I notice on horror movies and TV shows, in which a child is taken out of the urban life that they have always known and put into a rural one. You often get the teenager who is pissed off about the move and resents the parents for making them do it. That wasn't me, however. I was pretty pleased and interested with the new change in my life. Living in the country opened the door to a completely different world for me, and I was interested in learning as much about it as I could. We moved right at the end of the school year. My parents wanted to make sure that I did not have an interrupted year of school, so that was cool. But it also meant that, especially since we moved out to a country house in the hills, that I would not have any new friends in my new area to hang out with. So I had to spend most of the time getting familiar with my new surroundings all by myself. Spending a lot of time by myself was an interesting and new experience for me. But in the beginning, I was a little hesitant to go off too far. I guess maybe I'd seen one too many scary movies where someone gets lost in the woods and thought it might happen to me. So I really didn't go hiking or anything like that. I would walk along gravel roads though, going a little further each time that I did. We had been living at the new place for about 2 months when the story takes place. It was later in July, if I remember correctly. What I mostly recall is that it was awfully hot outside, and I was feeling sort of cooped up. So sometime around 10 p.m., I decided that I would go out for a bit, for a walk. That was my first time going out at night. As I mentioned, I was worried about getting lost or experiencing something weird. But I don't know why. For some reason that night, I just thought that I should go out for a walk. And when I went out, I also figured that I wouldn't stay out too late, nor would I go out too far. But I guess as I was walking along, I got to thinking. I can't in any way recall what it was I was thinking about, but I do recall that it must have been pretty important to me at the time. I recognized at one point that I had walked further than I ever had before, but even then, I didn't think about turning back. I just kept going and kept thinking and walking along. What finally brought me out of my deep thought was a bit of a shock to my system. I thought I heard a voice say something. I don't know what it was that it may have said, but it sounded like a human voice talking. It shocked me a bit, thinking that I had been alone. If you've ever been startled by a voice when you thought you were alone, you would understand how I felt. I looked ahead of me, and I stopped when I saw some movement. Trying to let my eyes adjust, I noticed that there was someone up ahead of me, and on the side of the road. They were faced away from me, down on their knees doing something. I couldn't tell what though. I heard the guy on the ground say something, but although I recognized it as the voice that I had heard previously, I couldn't make out what he was saying. But it seemed like he was talking to something on the ground. It was just so weird. "Hey, can I help?" I began to ask. I was quickly cut off when the person jumped up off their feet. He yelled something and then threw something at my face. He then ran off. It took me a second to figure out what he had thrown at me, but I soon realized it was a dead bird. I didn't know what else was on my face, but I had a pretty good idea after that. It might have been bird blood. and the guy may have been talking to the damn bird. Fortunately, he didn't run the way I had to walk to get home. But that didn't keep me from being any less uneasy as I was walking along. If someone talks to birds while they are killing them, then who can tell what sort of weird stuff they might also do? I got home and confirmed that I had blood all over my face. It was nasty and it took forever to get clean. When I ended up finally in school and making friends, I did tell some about what had happened to me. They just all told me that there are pretty weird people out in the hills, and you just have to be wary of them. Of course, that was not very helpful, but if I ever saw the strange man again, I didn't know. But it wasn't the last weird thing to ever happen to me out there. Number 2. Cabin. There was a period of time when things were not going so great in my life. I was not too long out of college, and the little bit of money I had left was running out. I was having an issue finding a job. The lease I had on the room that I had been renting throughout college was about to run out, and I really didn't have a good plan as to what to do next. Fortunately, though, I got thrown a lifeline. My cousin owned a cabin that he wasn't using, and he offered to let me stay in it for a little while. I was able to do some online work doing research with one of my former professors, which I could do completely from the cabin. This way, I would be making money, plus I would have a place to stay while I tried to figure out what my next steps in life were going to be. My cousin picked me up at the bus station when I arrived in town. He then drove me to the cabin. Now, although this was a lot more rural than I'd ever been before, it wasn't like in the movies or anything. It wasn't a cabin in the absolute middle of nowhere. It was about a 30-minute drive from the town, and it had electricity, cable, and internet. So, although I didn't have a vehicle, I would have most of what I needed to get by in the cabin. And then my cousin would come by every now and then and take me to the store. For the most part, I kept to myself and kept quiet. I didn't go out and meet or look for people or try to make friends. I didn't know how long I would be staying there. I had been staying in the cabin for a few months one night when I was watching a movie. It was pretty late at night, definitely after midnight, and that was when I heard some commotion coming from outside somewhere. I wasn't sure what it was, but it was odd to hear anything since it was normally very quiet out. I just decided not to pay any attention to it at first. I kept watching my movie. After another moment, I heard a lot louder noises, and suddenly someone was pounding on the front door of the cabin. "Help me! Help me!" a male voice called out while pounding on the door. "Someone is trying to kill me!" So yeah, that sent a bit of a shock through me. I got up and went over to the door. And yeah, there was a guy who was standing right outside. He was a pretty big guy, actually, and he was pounding on the door. I didn't see anyone else out there with him, though. But I supposed if someone was trying to hurt the guy, they may have been chasing him or something. I was about to open the door and try to help the guy out. However, right before I did, I noticed when he moved that he had a knife sheathed on his belt. He had on a loose flannel shirt that had mostly been covering it up to that point, but just a slight shift as he looked around revealed it to me. And it wasn't a small knife either. This was a big hunting knife. And of course I had to wonder if someone was after this guy who was carrying a big hunting knife with him, and someone who was trying to kill him as he claimed. Why wasn't he using the hunting knife to defend himself? The knife was clipped into the sheath too, so it wasn't like he had tried to use it and just put it back. It just didn't make sense. I had been only moments away from unlocking the door and letting the man inside, but I froze right then, and I didn't move for a moment. And unfortunately, the guy outside caught on that I hesitated. And when he did, he stopped asking to be let in. Instead, he reached over and he revealed the knife. Unsheathing it, he used the handle of it to try and break the window in the cabin door. It was weird how quickly things changed. But it was also bad because I went from trying to help someone 1 second to becoming a possible victim the second later. I looked around the room, trying to find something as quickly as I could, and it only took a moment until the handle of the hunting knife busted through the window. This all happened so quickly that it'll probably take longer to explain it than it actually did to happen. There was a fireplace in the living room of the cabin, which is the room that I was in. I never used it because it was summer, but there was a brand new set of fireplace tools right in front of it, and one of those tools was a poker. I grabbed the poker as quickly as I could. I swung it and brought it down on the hand of the man trying to break into the cabin. He still had the knife in his hand, trying to break the glass out of the window so he could get to the door lock. The swing of the poker must have hurt him bad, because he yelped and withdrew his hand. However, he got his hand then cut on a shard of glass, and he dropped the knife outside of the door. I would have preferred that he had dropped it inside, but I didn't care that much. He was able to grab it back with his other hand, but then he ran off rather than continue trying to get in. I figured his hand must have been hurt too bad to continue with the attempted break-in. I called both the police and my cousin. Describing the man to them, they recognized him as a local poacher. I'm not sure why a poacher would have tried to break into a cabin, but whatever. I stayed in the cabin for a few more months without any incident before getting a good job back in the city and moving back there for good. Number 3. Pool. Growing up, I got picked on a whole lot. It was not that I was really small, and I wasn't really a nerd either. But what I mostly think is because I was just a really quiet guy. I kept to myself, and I guess I did play a lot of computer games. But doing so is much more common today than it was back then. This was the 80s, and playing Zork and King's Quest didn't really get you the amount of cool points that the computer games of today do. So I liked the summer months the best. That was because I lived out of town, off on a rural route. So for the most part, I didn't have to put up with the kids from school, who were always just jerks to me. For me, summer was a combination of staying in and playing games, and spending time not getting bugged by bullies. The only time I had a bad experience during the summer was when I was 13 years old. That was when my parents were invited to go on a cruise with some people that my dad worked with. They offered to take me along, but I really didn't like that idea. I was deathly afraid of those big ships. I don't think that I told them that, though. I just asked if it was possible that I could stay in town with my aunt and uncle. And I thought it was fortunate at the time that they agreed to let me. But it didn't take very long for me to realize that I wasn't going to be as happy in town as I was at our own house. I found out pretty quickly that some of the kids who gave me such a hard time in school lived in town, too. My cousin wanted to go to the swimming pool nearly every day during the summer. My aunt liked to read by the pool, too, so we went there a whole lot. And on the very first day, the guys that gave me problems were all at the pool also. They continued to give me a lot of crap for the whole time that I was there. I mean, they didn't get physical with me at first, because of the lifeguards, and there were a lot of parents there as well. But bullying doesn't have to be physical in order for it to be crushing. So, the time that it took for my parents to travel to Florida for the cruise, and the time of the cruise itself, my parents were gone for over 2 weeks. and all I could do was wish for them to get back, so I could go back to my normal life. I quit going to the pool for the most part, but my aunt and cousin eventually were able to talk me back into going. My cousin told me that the guys from school, who had been giving me a hard time, hadn't been there in days. So I did go back to the pool during the second week of my parents being away. And for the most part, I had a really good time. Much like my cousin told me, the guys weren't at the pool that day. So I was even brave enough at one point to jump off the diving board, which is something I had never done before. Hell, I liked it enough to do it a few more times. So all in all, at that point, that day at the pool was the best day I'd had since my parents went to the cruise. After the pool, I went into the guys' locker room to take a shower. There were several stalls in the shower area, which was helpful. I probably would have been less likely to shower in an open area. While I was showering, though, I suddenly heard some thumping up against the door of the stall, and it only took a few minutes before the latch gave in, and the 3 kids who bullied me came into the stall. So that was a terrifying moment in of itself. I was a naked 13-year-old with 3 kids in their swim trunks. There were a few younger kids in the other stalls, but they ran off to save themselves, as was to be expected of children that age. I really didn't know what to expect, but the biggest guy tripped me, and I fell, skinning my knee and hitting my nose against the wall of the stall. Why don't we throw him naked out into the pool? One of the guys laughed. Hey, we could make him do something else, one of the others said. I turned around at that point and saw one of the guys pulling the front of his shorts down, and I had a pretty good idea what he was going to try and make me do. So I got up to struggle and try to get out. But when I did, one of the guys pushed me back. I slipped and hit my head against the wall. I didn't black out or anything, though. I couldn't hear much, and I saw blood rushing down into the drain. I was a bit freaked out and thought it was only going to get worse. But as I was waiting for more beating, it didn't come. But I can say that while lying there, I was very unaware of what was going on and was convinced that I had a serious injury and might die lying there in the stall. Things were a bit fuzzy, but I was pretty strongly expecting something bad to happen. But the next memory that I have that's not fuzzy was being wrapped in a towel and sitting on a bench. When I slipped and fell, I hit my head a lot harder than I had thought. Blood was gushing from my ear, and the bullies actually got freaked out and ran off. My cousin found me lying in the stall when he came to see what had been taking me so long. I dreaded seeing those guys again, expecting them to maybe beat the crap out of me in a less public place. But it didn't happen. I think their actions scared them enough that they took to bullying others around instead of me. Now, not an ideal ending, I know, but we can't change everything. Hey y'all, Killer Orange Cat here. Thanks for everyone being patient about the little bit of extra time it took me to get this out. I just want to let you know what I'm going to be up to this week. I am going to try my best to get some new material out. But also, I never made a May or a June compilation video, and I had meant to keep up on those. So I will be having both of those come out this week as well. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please feel free to hit the subscribe button and the bell below. Or wait for the icon of Ichigo the cat. That will appear at the end of this closing. Leave me a comment to let me know what you thought of the video, and consider sharing it with someone you think might enjoy it. If you have an original video you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please send it to the address included in the description. But most importantly, please don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.